Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 163 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. It's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and I'm joined again today by Richard. How's it going today, Richard?
Hey, Seth, what's going on?
Oh, man, lots of surprising stuff, actually. So we have one super huge topic for this week, and that is Dominaria. So a little background on this. Dominaria spoilers weren't supposed to start until the beginning of April, so 2-3 weeks from now. But thanks to a quirk of fate and some errors on Wizards' end, so the whole thing got leaked on a Chinese website. Richard, how does this keep happening? Before we talk about Dominaria, how in the world can this happen like every other set over a period of years?
I think Chinese website is not specific enough, Seth. The official Wizards Chinese website released the release notes, which, it explains all of the rulings and intricacies of the cards. So we got roughly 140 cards out of 249 cards spoiled. No art, no rarity, no flavor text, but we have all the planeswalkers, all the mechanics, basically like every non-vanilla card we got. So yeah, how does it? This is like every spoiler season. It's either some guy in a factory runs off with a sheet, someone accidentally posts something, someone sends something to some media outlet, they post it. I don't know what's going on, Seth. Wizards is losing a non-zero amount of money for this. This cannot be good. I don't know how it keeps happening.
So I'm the content manager at Goldfish, and part of my responsibilities is posting the articles, and I occasionally make mistakes. I put a deck in the wrong format, something like that. Forget to put the image in, little things like that. So I can understand how mistakes happen, but that's just me. Like, that's me, one person that's making content and posting these articles. Wizards is a huge company owned by an even bigger company. You would think that there would be like multiple sets of eyes that would be like, this is actually the release notes for Dominaria, not the release notes for Masters 25 that you're supposed to be publishing today. So I don't understand how it keeps happening. I think there is a silver lining and good news, and I got to get your opinion on this, but my hype level went up significantly when I saw the spoiler. Like, I was already excited for Dominaria, but I feel like, for me, it is what I was hoping for, and it really hit the mark. But before we get to the individual cards and mechanics, what was your first take when you're reading over this imageless leak of 140 cards?
Well, first take was why WotC? Why would you do this? I don't like it. I don't not the set. I just don't like being spoiled like this. Like the set as a whole, it's just so hard to review all the cards. You actually need to sit down and read 140 cards, and there's no art. This gives you an appreciation of the art of Magic. Maybe it's not the number one thing you look at when you look at a card, but it's kind of sad looking at all these cards with no art, no rarities. There's like no flavor. It's just like generic pieces of cardboard. But that aside, I actually really like the flavor of the set. It's kind of what we thought Dominaria should be. Maybe it doesn't have Counterspell or all the broken cards, but there is a Llanowar Elf in here. But it's just a lot of iconic characters. We called it Teferi's back as a planeswalker. Jaya's here as a planeswalker. Jaya is here, and we have the old tribes. We have some new mechanics we'll talk about, but it feels very fitting for a return to Dominaria set. It doesn't feel like it's going to be Battle for Zendikar, where you're kind of there, but you're not really there. This feels like you're right at home on Dominaria.
Yeah, that was my impression too. There's a lot of reprints, more so than most sets. There's a lot of callbacks to old cards, old characters, and we'll talk about a lot of that stuff as we go along. I don't know. I'm really excited for it. I like the themes of the set, the ideas of the set. I did want to, though, before we delve into the themes, the mechanics, the cards, just give a warning. If you are someone who's waiting for spoiler season, it might be a good idea to skip the podcast this week. We are going to be talking about some of the spoiled cards. We did get some information today as well about spoiler season, and it's always weird for Wizards to know what to do when this happens, and it happens way more than it should, and that's disappointing, but they are going to start spoiler season a bit early on the 21st, which is a week from Wednesday, when it was supposed to be, I think the 2nd of April was supposed to be the start of spoiler season. So they're kind of trying to like split the difference, I guess, instead of just being like, all right, spoiler season starts today, or oh, you gotta wait a whole nother 3 weeks until spoiler season. They picked like literally the middle date between today and when spoiler season was supposed to start. It was like, okay, we'll do it then. So it's gonna start a little bit earlier. So if you're waiting for official spoilers, that's when they're starting. But today, we gotta talk about it. This is the big news. A little sad that it's overshadowing Masters 25, although maybe that's a good thing because a lot of people were pretty angry. And that's, what do you think of the tinfoil hat theory, Richard, that this was not a mistake? I've seen this from some people that I actually kind of respect their opinion, not just like the dark conspiracy theory corners of the internet, but that this was a marketing move by Wizards. They heard the Tree of Redemption freak out, the Masters 25 freak out, and they were like, oh my god, we gotta do something, and they accidentally, quote unquote, release this release notes.
I mean, I understand that this is so ridiculous that it must be on purpose, but I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't know how much money they're gonna lose, like how much hype they lost because of this, but if they wanted to tinfoil hat leak something, they would just leak, like, you know, Teferi Planeswalker card or something, not the whole set. So I don't think this was on purpose, although the speed at which they addressed this was interesting. It seems like they had some process in place to address leaks. Unfortunately, they should have put that effort into, you know, preventing the leak to begin with. But my guess is they expected some guy in the factory to release the sheet again, and they're like, okay, we're gonna do this when this happens. Because their response was, you know, within like 16 hours or something, they had like a statement out, and the next day they put the whole thing out in English. So their response was pretty good, but I like to see them tighten up on on the actual leak, so we don't have these weird conspiracy theories about how WotC is releasing Teferi to deflect from Tree of Redemption.
I definitely got to give him credit for at least addressing it. I think Aaron Forsyth mentioned it in his article today that when this first happened, they took the like, oh, we're gonna like plug our ears and pretend like no one knows what's going. We'll just act like everything is normal, and that was like the worst technique because then everyone was like wondering if the cards were real, and it was causing all other kinds of problems. So I'm glad that they did address it, and they did address it really quickly. Like, it's a horrible situation. I would be happier, and I think like 99% of Magic players would be happier if leaks never happened. So no one's like in support of leaks, but at least Wizards is getting better at dealing with them when they happen. Like you said, hopefully they can somehow tighten this up. I guess it's got to be hard. We don't really think about how many people go into making Magic sets. Like, in the past, we've had someone from a factory leak a sheet. We've had people who translate the cards into all the different language that Magic's cards are made into. Some of those people have leaked cards. There's a lot of people. Like, we think, oh, there's R&D and there's like, 20 people or whatever that make the Magic set. But when you look at the big picture of translations and factories and the printing process, there's actually a lot of people that know the cards in Dominaria ahead of time. So it's kind of, I guess, unsurprising that some of these people don't get overexcited or want some internet glory and decide to leak it out. So I guess I don't know what they do to plug the leak. Like, I don't know how you make that not happening when you consider everything that goes into making a Magic set, but hopefully they figure something out.
Time to get into the details, Seth. Lay it down. What is this set bringing? What is Dominaria bringing to the Magic world?
Okay, so we learned a few big things from the leaks as far as like themes and mechanics, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So we got a few different topics. We're going to talk about Planeswalkers. We're going to talk about the two different mechanics, and then a couple, like, I don't even know if they're mechanics or keywords or like changes or flavor things. So we're basically just going to go through everything, talk about some reprints. So Richard, let's start it off with, probably the most exciting part of the set, honestly, and that is the 3 Planeswalkers, all of which are representing really iconic characters from the history of Magic. So why don't you tell us what Planeswalkers are in the set, Richard?
All right, we have Teferi, we have Karn, and we have Jaya. So let's start with Teferi. 3 white and a blue. Starts with 4 loyalty. +1, draw a card. At the beginning of the next end step, untap 2 lands. -3, put target non-land permanent in its owner's library, third from the top. -8, you get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent and opponent controls.
Oh, I love this card. It reminds me a lot of my favorite Planeswalker, Venser, the Sojourner. Like, the abilities on this kind of remind me of that. So, one of the big deals here is a +1 is the draw a card mechanic. We've seen, like, Dovinban be a little bit lacking and not really played, but that has the -1 draw a card ability. So you can't just keep drawing a card and drawing a card. The +1 is really nice. Untapping the land's a nice little bonus. Like, you can tap out to play something on your main phase and then still have mana for like a Fatal Push or a Censor or something. Not a literal counter spell, but you can still like interact with your opponent on their turn. And then the ultimate is very Venser-esque. All you do is draw cards and eventually you're going to just kill your opponent from drawing cards. So what do you think, Richard? How good is Teferi?
Good, because it's basically Omnixilus. +1, draw a card, -3 removal. Interesting removal because it's a non-land permanent, first of all, so it hits non-creatures, and you put it third from the top, so they have to redraw it, and it's basically the tuck rule, kind of, even though the tuck rule doesn't exist in Commander anymore, but you get to put stuff into the library, and you can be clever and shuffle and things like that if you feel like it. So I think Teferi will be, okay to, he'll be playable, but he's not going to dominate standard or anything. We've seen this kind of Planeswalker before. The real question is, will we have legitimate instants to do stuff with when you untap 2 lands with this +1? Because it is more than just draw a card. It's draw a card, get 2 mana, but that mana comes at instant speed, so to speak, because you don't get it till your end step.
Yeah, so I think that is a big question. And we already have some stuff. A lot of the good stuff is outside of the colors. Like Fatal Push is probably the thing I think of most as far as taking advantage of that. But you can use random counter spells. Like Negate is not horrible there. Censor. But I think you're right. It is a 5-mana Planeswalker. And that means the bar is pretty high for it to actually be a standard staple. But I think we've seen like 5-mana Jace with +1 draw a card. Like we've seen those cards show up in control decks. So I could imagine Teferi can probably do something similar because it fits kind of in the same space as some of the Jaces we've seen in the past. And I think Obnixilus is a really good comparison, right down to the fact that it has an ultimate that wins you the game as cards are drawn. Like it is very similar to the blue-white version of Obnixilus, but
All right, great designer search question, Seth. What exactly is white about Teferi? Is it the tucking?
I think the tucking is like unexpectedly absent or whatever that card is. So I think the tuck part, I think blue can go on top of the library,
Yeah, blue
but
can
I
go on
don't think
top.
blue can go cards down in the library. And then I guess the exiling ultimate is pretty white-ish. Like blue doesn't really exile permanents. So
I guess I just ignored the ultimate altogether, but you're right.
So I think those are the two main parts. The top ability feels pretty much just mono blue though, the +1.
So, how do you feel about doubling season, where you basically just ultimate Teferi immediately, and then you get the most broken ultimate ever?
Yes, it works. I feel like every time a Planeswalker is printed, we talk about it, and rightly so, because it is really sweet. Yes, it's super cool, but every Planeswalker is super cool if you have a doubling season out. That's a very low bar for a Planeswalker to get over if you have a doubling season. And so it's sweet, but I don't think it's any sweeter than just like, oh, my Nahiri gets an Emrakul, or oh, I make infinite Jace Cunning Castaways. Like, your Planeswalker just, yes, it combos with doubling season. It's really cool.
All right, Karn says, hold my beer. I don't combo with doubling season. Here comes Karn, Scion of Urza. 4 generic mana, starts with 5 loyalty. +1, reveal the top 2 cards of your library. An opponent chooses one of them. Put that card in your hand and exile the other with a silver counter on it. -1, put a card you own with a silver counter on it from exile into your hand. -2, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control.
This is the most surprising of the Planeswalkers to me. This is not anywhere near what I expected from another Karn Planeswalker.
Karn sucks.
I actually,
what happened?
I actually think this card is good. I'm just very surprised that it's 4 mana, doesn't really interact with the opponent. Like, that's what I was expecting from Karn. But I think that it actually is a really strong, potentially a strong Planeswalker. You definitely got to build around it, but we have, like, treasure tokens in Standard. It seems really easy that you just play good cards that happen to make treasures and maybe some other artifact, Scrap Heap Scrounger, Bomat Courier, and at the worst case, Karn is going to be, like, 4 mana, make a 5/5, make a 6/6, which is pretty good, especially since you can -2 twice before you run out of power. So I think you got to build around it, but I actually think that Karn is the best of the Planeswalkers that we have seen from Dominaria. You don't like it though, Richard?
I don't like Karn. They should have made like a monstrous 12 mana Karn that only Tron can play, and it does nutty things. Because this card is kind of sad, going from Karn Liberated to this. At least the -2 should have counted cards with silver counters on them. Or at least there should have been some internal synergy here. But basically, you get like, you draw a card your opponent lets you draw, and then the next turn you might be able to draw that with the minus, and then just making artifact creatures. I don't know, it feels kind of like what's his face, Tezzeret, where you need to put him in like a strictly artifact deck. You can't just jam him anywhere, and that makes him not as exciting. He is big for 4 mana at 5 loyalty. He is big, but he doesn't protect himself. And it's Standard. You're not going to have artifact lands. You're not going to have a bunch of useless mana rocks around. You can't just pop out like a 4/4 or 5/5 easily. You got to do a lot of work to get those constructs to be respectable.
So I'm gonna say that while obviously not as strong as Karn Liberated, I think that this version of Karn is actually more in line with Karn traditionally. Like, if you look back to original Karn Silver Golem, Silver Golem
that was the bad Karn too.
but it was all about interacting with artifacts, turning non-creature artifacts into creatures, and then Karn's Touch turned a non-creature artifact into an artifact creature. So I feel like if we're going about history and trying to like call back to old characters, I feel like this is more on point with who Karn was, 20 years ago than Karn Liberated, which is actually probably not really anything like Karn's traditional character. It's just like colorless and really, really strong.
I don't know. I think if you wanted to go like Karn, you could have done something like +1, put like a silver counter on up to 2 target creatures, -1, like exile a creature with a silver counter, or maybe like exile a creature with a silver counter you control, draw 2 cards or something.
All right.
You gotta turn stuff into like artifacts or something as Karn. This one you just pop out constructs.
Well, we can do Construct Tribal in Standard. I've had people, I get all these deck lists for doing the deck techs, the Fishbowl Thursday deck techs, and Construct Tribal is a very popular submission for Fishbowl Thursday. So maybe, now that we have Karn on the top end, maybe we'll actually play Construct Tribal.
I do agree with you that Karn is probably the strongest and most likely to see play Planeswalker here. But we got to see the Planeswalker deck Planeswalkers. We don't know yet.
That is true. We might have another Ajani situation. We do have one more Planeswalker, though. We have Jaya Ballard. So, Richard, What does Jaya do?
We got Jaya Ballard, 2 red, 5 starting loyalty, +1, add red to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast instant or sorcery spells. +1, discard up to 3 cards, then draw that many cards. -8, you get emblem with, you may cast instant and sorcery cards from your graveyard. If a card cast this way would be put in your graveyard, exile it instead.
So, I like Jaya Ballard because I think it is maybe the first Planeswalker we've seen that seems very much designed to be part of a combo deck. Like, this is, like, if you're somehow going to play Storm, Planeswalker Storm, Jaya Ballard is, like, the perfect card for that. The problem is that seems like a really niche market. Like, I don't know if Planeswalker Storm is a thing. And Jaya Ballard doesn't really do anything in a typical game of Magic. Like, I guess drawing 3 and discarding 3, or discarding 3 and drawing 3, which is actually kind of tricky, because that means you have to be playing a red deck and have 3 cards left in your hand to be able to discard after you play your 5-mana threat, which usually 5 mana is like the top end of your red deck. The adding mana, I don't know what you do with that. I think while you can probably build a really fun janky deck with this card, I can't see this being anywhere near playable in any format.
Yeah, all of the pieces, all of the abilities, you think Storm, you're like, okay, this is like Pyretic Ritual, and this is Past in Flames, but then you're like, I gotta tick it up like 3 times, and on the 4th turn, I can Past in Flames, and this costs me 5 mana, and, you know, if I'm hellbent because my opponent is thought seizing me because like they should, then how am I gonna discard anything to draw a card? It's like, it's just none of this actually works. So yeah, I don't know what you would do with this. Maybe you just have like really slow standard Storm where it's like a turn 6 Storm kill, and that's what you do with Jaya Ballard. I don't know. Maybe it's standard Storm, but I just can't see Jaya being used for anything useful here, especially since that +1 is limited to instants or sorceries. You can't even like play a creature to like block for Jaya Ballard. You kind of just tap out and hope they don't have anything.
Yeah, doubling season though, Richard. You can, with doubling season, it's literally a strictly worse Past in Flames.
It's like 9 mana Past in Flames. We got there.
We figured it out.
But she lives, so next turn you can then ritual.
Well, those are the Planeswalkers. So I think our rankings, if I was going to rank them in terms of just strictly seeing play, I would go Karn, although with the caveat that it's in very specific decks. You got to build around it. Teferi, I think, would be next. You can probably jam it in any blue-white control deck as a 2-of or something, and it'll be pretty good, but just how good will depend on the meta. And then Jaya, way down at the bottom. I don't know how you ever play that card. Maybe it'll be fun for like casual play or something, but how does that line up with your rankings, Richard?
Yeah, I think that's about right. Although I'm gonna say the Planeswalkers, like no joke, are gonna battle for top spot because they've been getting more and more competitive, and I think this cast of Planeswalkers is a bit weak. So you might actually see some of those other Planeswalkers being played.
Well, let's move on. We got a lot to cover today, so let's talk mechanics from Dominaria. And first off, we have the big new mechanic from the set, which is really interesting and fairly unique. That is Saga. So, Richard, why don't you give us an example of a Saga card so we can understand how this new mechanic works?
Okay, we have one card with art, which is the card Watsy gave us today, Phyrexian Scriptures, and it's a mythic, 2 black. And if you actually look at it, it's like a full art card with a scroll going down the side, and it says, "As this saga enters, and after your draw step, add a lore counter. Sacrifice after 3. So 1, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. That creature becomes an artifact in addition to its other types. 2, destroy all non-artifact creatures. 3, exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards." And enchantment, Saga. So it's like an enchantment with suspend, where after every counter you get some effect that goes off.
Yeah, so just to run down what this actually would do in a game. So you untap, you cast your Phyrexian Scriptures. Right away, you get to put that +1/+1 counter on one of your creatures. Then your next turn, the phrasing here is weird. It says at the end of your draw step. What that actually means is at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase is essentially how that plays. So as you start your pre-combat main phase on the following turn, you blow up everything that's not an artifact. So you get to keep that one creature. And then on your next beginning of pre-combat main phase, or end of draw step as they're wording it, then you would exile all cards from your opponent's graveyards, and you would lose the Phyrexian Scriptures. So I think the best comparison for this, which is a little weird, is it's kind of like this weird temporary, oh no, what's the mechanic? The Cogworkers from Unstable. What was the name of that?
Oh, contraptions.
Yeah, it reminds me somewhat of contraptions in how it actually works. Like, they are a little different because of the triggering when they enter the battlefield, but basically at the start of your first pre-combat main phase, you crank it to the next sprocket and do something, and so it's kind of like the black border version of that. So what do you think of this card, I guess, Richard, and mechanic in general? Like, is this powerful? Is it good? Do you like it?
I mean, I think it's gotta be good. It's like 4 mana Wrath with Suspend 1. Like, that alone is good enough, but you get to save your creature. And then for some reason, the following turn, you get to clear everyone's graveyards. So, the mechanic is weird. It seems weird, but I guess it's like new and innovative. We haven't really seen that aside from, actual silver-bordered mechanics. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do with this. I'm assuming this interacts with Doubling Season. Do you get to skip sagas if you just put more counters on?
You would. I believe you would. What is this, a Doubling Season podcast?
It's a counter, right? So
I think you would get both, because one of the weird things about it is the triggering. It doesn't just trigger at the beginning of your end of your draw step, or however, that's such weird wording, but it doesn't just trigger based on the number of counters. It triggers when a counter is added. So I think if you Doubling Seasoned, you would basically skip up from 1 to 3, if I'm understanding it correctly, and there would not be the second counter.
Yeah.
That also, it's weird, a lot of people have asked about Solemnity, and thinking like, oh, I can set this on, destroy all non-artifact creatures, play a Solemnity, do that every single turn. But that doesn't actually work, because the counter isn't being added, and that's what actually triggers the ability on the Saga, like, is the counter going onto it. So I think you can maybe manipulate the counters, like if you have a way to remove a counter, add a counter, you would, and it would trigger at instant speed. There's no timing restriction. So if you have a way to remove a counter at instant speed, or I don't know, you Vampire Hexmage to reset it down to 0 counters, then I believe it would just keep going and going. So there are some tricks you can do there, but it's definitely very unique and weird.
Yeah, I was thinking, the Hex Parasite or, those kind of effects, and then just every turn Wrath the board.
Or like Proliferate. I think Proliferate you would actually get, if you're at 1 counter and you proliferated, you go to the next counter and then you get the next one. Or double Proliferate, you'd probably get both, like number 2 and number 3. So it's interesting to build around. What do you think of the aesthetic of this card, Richard? Do you like how it looks?
I think it's fine. I don't know. It's like kind of full art, but then it's not, and there's a scroll, and then you actually see the Phyrexian watermark on the scroll in this card. I think it's fine. I don't know. When I play it on Moto, 100% guarantee it's not going to look like this, so it doesn't matter. It's just going to look like a Planeswalker or something on Moto, so I don't know. I think it's okay. Nothing like revolutionary, but like it's like an okay looking card.
I really like it. My initial reaction was I thought it looked really cool. So I'm excited to see them still like trying new things with that. And I think it works well with the counters being added and how the card works mechanically. So I do like that aspect of it. So we'll see. They feel like very hard cards to evaluate in the context of Standard, just because they're pretty unique in how they work. Like, this isn't just, it's very similar to a past mechanic, other than the silver bordered stuff. So what are some of the other sagas that we got, Richard, that are exciting potentially?
I just want to point out that you can disenchant these things. So it adds like a lot of interaction here. When you think you get a Suspend Wrath, and your opponent just untaps and disenchants it, you might be a little sad.
Oh, along those same lines, like, that is a downside, but also potentially an upside, because you can reset it with your Flicker Wisp or something. So you can be sneaky, or some of them, as we'll see, like with Fall of the Thran, they kind of have like a powerful first ability, and then the later abilities are actually arguably a drawback, depending on how you build your deck. And then if you can disenchant it or cast out it, you would prevent the future ones from happening. So I really like the complexity and all the different ways you can play them, because there's some cool tricks I think you could do with the Saga cycle.
All right, let's talk about Fall of Thran. As you alluded to, 5 End of White. 1, destroy all lands. 2 and 3, each player returns 2 lands from their graveyard to the battlefield.
I can't believe they printed this card. When
it's 6 mana though.
It's an Armageddon.
It's so slow, and then it's like Armageddon joking, have some lands back.
You just gotta build around it. I am not above playing a Sentinel Totem or some sort of Tormod script effect to turn this into an actual Armageddon. I am shocked, really. Like, sure, it's not literal Armageddon, but they don't print cards that say destroy all lands. That's not a thing that Wizards prints, like, just period. So I was surprised to see that they actually printed this card, and I said this on Twitter, but I think Wizards is underestimating my ability and desire to play horrible decks if it means I get to make my opponent not play Magic. So I plan on playing a lot of Fall of the Thran. I might lose a lot, but at least I'm going to make some opponents really miserable as I'm losing.
I really want it to be like one less mana, so that you don't have to play the janky deck, but you can play it in a serious. Like, can you imagine going Gideon into Fall of Thran or something like an actual curve that looks, or like turn 1 Lawnmower Elves, and then you actually power this out at a respectable turn? Because 6 means 7 is when it Armageddons, and it's really slow for do nothing, and then it's like. You don't lock them out because they get to put lands back, so you actually need to play another card to get rid of their lands.
Well, so it does Armageddon when it enters the battlefield, because you get that first counter when it enters. So it is like just 6 mana, blow everything up. So there's no suspend on this one, really. The suspend is the drawback, but still, it is true. 6 mana is a little bit more than you'd want to pay for an Armageddon, but I've tried to find Armageddons for Modern even, and they just don't exist. Like, I guess you have maybe Wildfire and cards like that can play like Armageddons, but destroy all lands is just not text outside of like 9 mana type cards like Obliterate that actually shows up in cards in Modern. So it's just been so long since we've had this text on a card that even though it's 6 mana, even though, yes, you got to build around it, your opponent gets land backs, it's still really exciting to me just to see that text on a Magic card in 2018.
I feel like this is Wizards' test to see if players can handle land destruction. It's kind of like that, what's that counter spell where you counter a spell and then the opponent draws 2 cards and you draw 1.
Oh, Arcane Denial, I think.
Yeah, it's like counter spell, but haha, joking, draw a card, right? Like, don't feel so bad, you're still my friend, right? That's like Fall Thread. It's like Armageddon, but okay, you get to slowly rebuild. It's not over yet, right? Like, don't leave, you can still play. All right, let's move on to the red saga. We have 1 in a red. 1, discard your hand. Always a good start. 2, draw 2 cards. 3, if a red source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player this turn, it deals that much damage plus 2 to that permanent or player instead.
Are they going to give us, like, Grape Shot or something? Like, is Storm hiding somewhere in Standard? Like, this reminds me, I said this precast when we were talking of Pyromancer Swath, I think it's called, the number 3 mode on this, where it doubles or does plus 2 damage to everything, which means if you can Grape Shot, every Grape Shot's like 3 damage. I don't know how you play this card in Standard, though. Like, the drawbacks are real. Discarding your hand is a pretty big cost, especially when number 2 is just draw 2 cards. It's not even like 3 cards or something. So, and then what do you do with the plus 2 damage? I guess you throw like as many lightning strikes as possible at your opponent's face in that turn and hope that it's enough.
I figured out this card set. That it is not meant for burn. It is meant for goblins.
Ooh,
you have 5 goblins. This is an extra 10 damage. Right, so it's meant for a go wide aggro deck, I believe, and it's like, I hope you have a Wrath in 2 turns, otherwise you're dead, right? And you just slam them with tokens, and each token deals an additional 2. I guess it counts for your spells too, so you kind of dump your hand with cheap goblins, use this to quote-unquote refill with 2 cards, and then go for an Alpha Strike the next turn. I think that's how this is supposed to be used.
That makes sense. So I was skipping right over the fact that it's just red source, so that does mean your creatures deal damage too. I was thinking of spells, but you're right. That does actually make the card a little bit better. Like, in theory, you could play this in your Ramanamp red deck, like your Earthshaker Kenras, and just dump your hand. Getting empty-handed for Hazrats may be a good thing. You use this to, like, make sure you have 0 cards in hand, and then you just kill your opponent with your random red creatures a couple of turns later.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I actually really like this card now. I think it might be actually too strong.
We've done a complete 180 on this card.
Because if you just have like 3 sources of damage, this is a 2 mana 6 damage burn spell, which is insanely powerful for closing out games. So you just need to have any respectable board state, which mono red, like not even a token deck, but just, Ramunap red will have, right? And if you go tokens, this thing gets even more absurd. So I actually kind of like it.
And it's sweet that you don't have to spend the mana on it. That's one of the big things with all these. We were talking about the Phyrexian scriptures or whatever. Like, yes, it's a wrath, which is nice, but the fact that it's a wrath that triggers for free and you still have all your mana available so you can just immediately replay a bunch of creatures, that's actually a big swing. So the fact that you're getting this +2 damage on everything, that means you're not, like, you still have your mana left over. So maybe you do need a lightning strike for 5 damage to finish off after you get in with your creatures. Like, that's a nice bonus too with all these cards, is that once you pay that initial cost, you're getting that ability for free each turn.
Yep. All right. Green Saga. 1 in the green. 1/2 until your next turn. Creatures you control gain tap, add 1 mana of any color. 3, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain vigilance, trample, and indestructible until end of turn.
Meh. I mean, I guess it's fine. I don't know. We don't know the rarity on none of these cards, so maybe this is like an uncommon or something.
No.
Maybe you think it's a rare?
It's at least rare, if not mythic.
I don't think this card's actually that strong. Like, Cryptolith Rites was good, but that was good in decks that, I don't know. I guess it's free. If you have 2 creatures, you like spend your land mana to cast it, and then you immediately can use it like this weird creature ritual type effect where you tap all your creatures to cast more stuff. But I don't know. Outside of like some weird combo-y situation where you play it and then make a bunch of mana with your creatures, the card doesn't really excite me.
Yeah, I don't like this card either. That plus that 3rd level Saga should be at least overrun. Getting +1/+1 on your... I guess it's a counter, so it's permanent, but +1/+1 usually isn't the most impactful thing. And if you need indestructible, unless you're killing them, they'll just alpha strike you back and kill you, so it's not as useful. Maybe you had lifelink as well, it would be better, but not as good as the red one. I think the red one is much, much better than this.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's move on from the Sagas, our new mechanic, to our returning mechanic in Dominaria, which is kind of a classic in its own right, Kicker. So Kicker is coming back. Richard, why don't you give us an example of a Kicker card in case we have some people that have never played with the mechanic before?
All right, this might be the best card in the set. We have Grun, the Lonely King, 4 green, 5/5. The type line is Legendary Creature, Ape Warrior. Yes? Yes, we have a legendary ape. Kicker 3. If Grun was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 5+1/+1 counters. When Grun attacks alone, double its power and toughness this turn. If you kick it, it's a 10/10, and it attacks as a 20/20.
Yeah, I guess there's probably some cool things you could do with that. I mean,
kicking it also, it's a 9 mana total if you kicked it.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. It is cool. It is legendary. Like, we're going to talk about that in a minute, because that's one of the other themes of this. A million cards are legendary. So I really love stuff like that for Commander. Like, legendary Ape Warrior is really sweet. I don't think we even have, like, an Ape Legend, so maybe you can play Ape Tribal or something. As far as Standard, I guess it's a 5/5 that attacks for 10 for 6 mana. Which I guess is okay. And then, or a 10/10 that attacks for 20. I guess the other thing we're missing is maybe if there's like a combo, if you can give this like double strike and trample, like a Temur Battle Rage, that's a pretty scary attacker even without the kicker cost. So maybe there's something that enables it in Standard, but just as a 5/5 that attacks for 10, is that really that much better than Verdurous Gearhulk or something? It seems like kind of in a similar space. Plus it's legendary, which is, we got to remember, a drawback when Standard is concerned compared to Commander where it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, essentially everything you said can be summed up with dies to Doomblade. Does nothing, kind of dies instantly, so kind of bad in Standard, but
the funny
Commander in mono green. Can you imagine attacking as a 20/20 and then sacrificing it to draw 20 cards after?
That does sound. That
with
seems like it would.
Momentous Fall or whatever those green cards are. Oh, that is the dream.
It seems like it fits right into like Galta. If you're playing Galta EDH, that does seem good.
Let's talk about dragons. We have 2 red 4/4 legendary creature dragon, kicker 3 flying. When it enters a battlefield, if it was kicked, create Carrick's Bladewing, a legendary 4/4 red dragon creature with flying.
Name tokens are so cool. I like name tokens for some reason. This card, it seems pretty reasonable to me. I'm having a really hard time evaluating a lot of these cards because they're legendary. And if that was just a normal card, it feels like arguably just an upgraded Broodmate Dragon. The fact that it's legendary, I don't know how that's going to play out. Like a 4/4 flyer for 4, that's on curve anyway. We played Thunderbreak Regent not that long ago. It was a standard staple. Getting 2 4/4 flyers for 7, that's like 1 more mana than Broodmate, but still you're doing it in mono red, so that's an upside. You don't have to be in 3 colors for it. So both of those rates seem pretty good, but I don't know, like, how many of these can you play in your deck? Like, can you play 4 copies of this because it's a legend? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, legendary kind of sucks because what you would expect to happen is you play this and then say your opponent has a piece of removal, say they remove Varix. You can't play this to get 3 dragons because your token will legendary rule the existing token. So there's some awkwardness here. You can't replenish like half of the card by legendary rule the other half. But it is a 4 mana 4/4 flying with upside. And it's a dragon. So I like it.
Well, since we're talking about a legendary thing and legendary and what it does to standard, I guess this is a good time to say we have legendary as basically one of the themes of this set. I did not count. The text-only spoiler is actually really hard to like parse through and make sense of, but there's got to be like 30, 40, 50 legendary creatures in the set, and that's just out of the 140 that we got in this leak. So, Richard, what do you think of all these legendaries?
They're cool. I mean, we have a lot of legendaries we didn't talk about, so we'll talk about them later, but there's a bunch that will make EDH players very, very happy. So we get new legendaries. We also have legendary spells, which is interesting. So I like the theme. I don't know how I feel about legendary being like one of those special keywords now that we can do random things with, but it is cool to get a bunch of flavorful things given that we're going back to Dominaria.
Yeah, this seems like it's got to be one of the best sets, period, for Commander that they've ever made. Like, just the fact that there's so many legends is going to be huge for the Commander format. As far as Standard, like I was just saying, I don't know what to make of some of these cards. Like, a lot of the cards, when I read them, I'm like, oh, that could be pretty powerful. And then I remember, oh, that's a legend? Like, is it powerful enough that it makes up for the fact that if I draw 2 of them, like, I'm, drawing dead cards? How does that actually play out? So I'm going to be really curious to see if these cards change standard deck building. Like, if we're seeing a lot of decks that are playing 2 and 3 ofs rather than 4 ofs to take advantage of cards that are powerful, but you don't really want to draw more than 1 of. So I think that's going to be interesting. You mentioned legendary spells. Legendary sorceries are confirmed basically exactly like normal sorceries, but you can't cast them unless you have a legendary creature or a planeswalker when you're trying to cast them. What do you think of that, Richard? Do you like it? Is legendary sorceries a good thing, a bad thing, powerful thing?
I mean, the cards are powerful. So take Urza's Ruinous Blast, 4 and a white. So you can only cast it if you control a legendary creature or planeswalker, and it's exile all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. So just straight up, like, remove everything that's not legendary for 5 mana. Very powerful, but you need a legendary on the battlefield. And like you said, there's the drawbacks to playing legendaries. So I don't know about standard, but EDH, this is great because your deck comes with a built-in legendary, i.e. your commander. So these cards will be easy to activate in EDH, but in standard, might be a bit rough.
Yeah, I think That's definitely a big question. Like, just how many legendaries can you play in standard? But it's going to be great for Commander. And the upside is with the legendary sorceries, you do get a reasonable amount of power, like Karn's Temporal Sundering. 6 mana, extra turn, also get to bounce a non-land permanent. That's a pretty good rate. Like, that's a pretty good rate for a 6 mana extra turn spell. So you are getting a bit of extra power, like a little bit more power, or like with Urza's Ruinous Blast, like you said, kind of like a 1 mana deduction in cost to make up for the fact that you need the legendary on the battlefield. Whether or not any of them are strong enough that you're like, I'm going to overload my deck with legends just to take advantage of a legendary sorcery, I think we got to wait and see as far as that's concerned. Finally, to wrap up our Dominaria discussion, 2 more really quick topics on the way out the door. First, we have a new, I guess it's a keyword, historic, Richard. What is historic?
Historic just means artifact, legendaries, and sagas. I don't agree with artifacts. It's such a common type. I don't know why it's historic now, but I guess the other things are historic.
Yeah, it is a little weird. I'm assuming artifacts is more for like gameplay purposes, because legendaries and sagas would be too restrictive, but it'll be interesting. We saw Jaya as a returning character that draws a card whenever you cast a historic, so artifact, legendary, or saga. Joyra's familiar, makes them a little bit cheaper, so we'll see what they actually do as far as gameplay. I guess it fits the theme of like history and the game's past, so I don't know. I guess it's fine. It's probably the part of the set I'm least excited about from what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not that major. I guess it's just like putting a name to existing types. Like you said, there was Joyra by the Light Captain. But yeah, it's just there. It's not, I don't think it's one of the big mechanics of the set.
And then last but not least, reprints, Richard. So reprints, man, I'm really excited for this. Llanowar Elves, Goblin Warchief, Siege Gate Commander, Verdant Force, the Czech lands from Innistrad, the other half of the Ixalan cycle. Are you surprised? Are you happy with the reprints? What's your take on those?
I'm surprised by Llanowar Elves. I thought they're like, no more 1-mana mana dorks, and then here we are, the original mana dork. But Goblins getting a lot of support in Standard and consequently in Modern. These 2 cards are new to Modern. Verdant Force, one of my favorite cards of all time. There are other Sapling synergies in the deck, so I'm hoping for a Standard Sapling deck. And Innistrad, Checklands, I don't care anymore. Since they printed the enemy fast lands, these things barely have modern playability, so they're kind of just there. They're very corner case. Would have been exciting a while back where they were really expensive, but since we have the fast lands now from where did the fast lands come from? Aether Revolt?
Kaladesh, yeah.
Kaladesh, these are not as exciting for modern and older formats.
I will say I am very excited actually for the Checkland reprint. Not because, like you said, it is true that they aren't as relevant for like tournament play anymore, but for Standard they even out the mana. I've definitely run into this a lot in deck building. The ally mana is a lot better than the enemy mana, so evening that out's going to be nice. The other thing is, these cards are weirdly expensive for building budget decks. Cards like Isolated Chapel, Woodland Cemetery, they're like 6, 7, Sulfur Falls even more, $10 in paper. So while the ally versions that were just reprinted in Innistrad are really cheap and like some of the best budget dual lands you can build with, these ones were too expensive to really be budget lands. But now that they're coming back in what seems to be a really high supply set, people are hyped for Dominaria. I think a lot will be opened. It should bring the prices way, way down and make them legitimate budget options for Modern. And like you, I'm definitely shocked by Llanowar Elves. That's one of the cards, like when we were kind of like joking and like, oh, they can print Lightning Bolt, they can print Counterspell. I'm pretty sure Llanowar Elves was a green card on our list when we were talking about that. So while we didn't get Lightning Bolts and Counterspells, green, like, the impact that's going to have on Standard is going to be huge. Like, I don't think people remember how powerful it is to play Llanowar Elves into a green 3-drop or a Nissa or something on turn 2 is just such a huge swing. So, green, it's been the best color in Standard for the last 2 or 3 years, and it seems like it's probably not going away.
Get those fatal pushes ready.
Yep.
2018, push the elf. That's the new expression we're going with. Yeah. That's what new Magic players will learn. They're like, Bolt the Bird. What are these cards? You mean push the elf?
Yeah. And the last thing, real quick, and then we got to get to fish mail because we're running long. Along with actual reprints, we get a lot of cool callbacks. Like we had a new Squee the Immortal, obviously a reference to Squee Goblin Nabob. We got Knight of Malice, which is kind of like a new updated version of Black Knight. There's a White Knight member of the cycle too. So I don't know. I'm excited for that. Like it plays into my overall excitement for this set where I was hoping that this is what the set was going to be. All these callbacks, references to old cards, powerful characters, good reprints, and I feel like I'm pretty happy with us having seen maybe half the set from this leak. I feel like they actually did hit the mark with this. It doesn't feel like Battle for Zendikar, where you take this beloved thing with beloved characters and change it so much that it doesn't have those feelings and the nostalgia for, thinking back on the past. So I feel like based on this leak, I feel like they really did nail it.
Yeah, thank God it wasn't like return to Dominaria overrun by Phyrexians. Yeah. Surprise. everyone you loved is dead and it's just Elish Norn.
Yeah.
No, it was actually Dominaria. So
Emrakul's on Dominaria now. Hooray.
What I do have to say is no dwarves, Seth.
The other, that is a little sad. I know, like, Atags was another one people were asking for, so there is some stuff that's not there, but I feel like they hit a lot of expectations from what we've seen so far. And also want to mention, super quick, remember, too, the next set after Dominaria is a core set. So when you see, like, goblins, you see the Saproling stuff, some of these tribes that aren't supported in Standard, pretty good chance that those tribes, maybe if they're not good enough when Dominaria releases, will also, like, carry over to the core set, get some more reprints, get some more support, because those are, like, pretty classic tribes that could easily be supported in a core set as well.
Yep.
Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our Dominaria discussion. Any last thoughts, Richard, before we move forward to our fish mail?
Set is hype. It's not releasing for like months, but yeah, it's hype.
Yeah, I think the official release is like April 27th and the pre-release is before that. So we do have a ways to go, but not next podcast, but the podcast after, we will have started the official spoiler season. So definitely expect all the usual stuff, articles and spoiler videos and podcast discussion. It'll be a lot better once we get the art for the cards. I definitely learned from the spoiler that just text-only Magic cards are rough. Like, they're not fun to look at. They're hard to make sense of. I didn't realize how much the actual, like, art and design of a Magic card plays into being able to, like, understand what that card does.
Yeah, even, like, flavor text, kind of miss flavor text when you don't have it, like, anywhere.
Yeah. Anyway, let's do some fish mail, Richard.
All right, let's move on to fish mail. If you have your questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag #MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air. First question, Josh Pig. What would it take for WotC to make a successful retail product targeted at Cube?
Ooh, I mean...
Isn't that master sets? That's
what I was going to say.
That's like literally a Cube draft plus a Cube.
Yeah, I think that cubing is so individual that I don't think that a like pre-constructed cube would be very popular, because it's kind of about like expressing yourself is how I understand cube building and the cubing community. So I feel like master sets is about as good as it gets.
All right, Raging Duck 729. What decks for each format would you recommend for someone breaking into Magic Online?
Ooh, well, Modern is easy. I always recommend the 8-Whack Goblins deck. It's budget friendly. You can play a ton of games because it's aggro, so it's easy for grinding with. Pretty easy to pick up, not super complicated. As far as Standard, I guess maybe like wait a month for the Challenger decks and build like the mono red aggro deck or something like that is what I would say. And Legacy, I have no idea what you start Legacy with.
Burn? I don't know if the actual cheapest deck in Legacy is.
I think Burn
anymore.
is probably the right choice. I don't know how competitive it is in the grand schemes. Like, I think it's competitive enough, but you're probably better off starting with Modern or Standard anyway.
Yeah. Brother Vance IRL. Possible solution to the missing host problem. Hold a competition. The Great Goldfish Search. Challenge listeners to competitions of deck building brews, card design, goldfish trivia. Winners get a guest spot.
We were actually joking about that the other day, that we should do that. That would be kind of interesting.
All right. The first question will be, when did Seth start playing Magic? Gotta sneak it in the podcast somehow.
Oh,
Seth.
we almost made it. We almost made it.
Legendary Hero 7. For someone interested in having a second modern deck, normally I play Skred. What decks would you suggest? My thoughts are on Merfolk or Death and Taxes.
I would go with, if those are the choices, I would go with Death and Taxes. I think Merfolk is, it's surprisingly, because it got more support in Ixalan block, is kind of like falling down the format rankings a little bit. So I would probably go with Death and Taxes if you're choosing between the two.
All right. Maxi Wawa, Seth, do you edit videos by hand, or do you have something that automatically cuts silent parts?
Oh God, that would be a dream come true. Yes, it is all edited by hand, so everything you see is going through there and clipping out the dead spots bit by bit.
All right. 11 Vicious, if you could finish the command cycle, i.e. cryptic command, in enemy colors, what would you want the spells to do?
Wait,
aren't is he talking about like Ojitai's command?
Oh, maybe. That must be that cycle, yeah, because Cryptic Command is monocolored. So,
I mean, Cryptic is the only good command, even of the monocolored, right? You have Profane Command. What's
Primal's
the green one?
pretty good.
Primal
Command's
Command,
pretty good.
yep. What's the red one do?
The red one's really bad.
Never seen it.
Wheels destroys a non-basic land and maybe like Pyroclasms or something. But it's like 5 mana. And the white one I guess is good in Commander.
Austere Command's used all the time in Commander.
Yeah. So if we're gonna, I don't even know. Enemy color commands. It's really hard because there's so many mechanics. That'd probably be like a 20-minute segment of a podcast.
It just needs to be good. It just needs to be worth the mana, and I'll take any effect as long as they're good. God of Grenades. Why no Goldfish Cube? It'd be awesome to have Scoop's Cube, and see you guys do content with it.
Ooh. Well, the biggest problem with that is Magic Online does not support unofficial cubes, so it would take some work to actually do it.
Yeah, I think Tomer actually has a cube, right? I remember someone has a cube. Maybe we can play cube one day.
That could be fun.
Yeah. I've never played cube ever.
I love cube.
Ever. Like literally ever. Not even the Moto cubes. Like ever.
You got to try it, Richard. It is some of the most fun you'll have. If you like Limited, it is the most fun you'll have playing Limited.
All right, Ben, Time and Space. After listening to the cast about the Great Designer Search, I realized that every player tends to have a style of play when it comes to deck building. What were your first styles of decks when you started playing Magic?
I was building against
heroic?
odds decks.
No.
I was Richard. Leave me alone. No, actually, I was building against. I didn't know they were against odds decks, but my first decks I would build were the same type of decks, like with some janky combo where the goal was to pull off this really cool thing, and I lost a lot. But when I did the really cool thing, it made me happy and made up for all the losing. So I think the first one was Eon Storm, which is a enchantment lets you remove counters from things to deal damage, along with some of the modular creatures in like Power Conduit and all these ways to like move charge counters and modular counters around. So
you see, back in my day, we didn't even have aggro or control. These words didn't even exist. So we just built Sarah Angel decks and Ship and Dragon decks and Singer Vampire decks and Air Elemental decks. You had to have flying, otherwise you couldn't block anything. But yeah, everyone played 20 lands in a 60-card deck, no matter what their curve looked like, because there was no curve. We would suspiciously mana weave shuffle. Just like anything goes. The Magic was not as advanced as it was, so we just built whatever we liked. So I think it was mid-range. Everyone kind of played mid-range. Atomic Sorcery. What cards from post-reserve list, Arcadia Masks, to pre-modern, pre-Mirrodin, would you like to see reprinted in modern?
Oh, boy.
I don't even know what sets that covers.
All right, I will give you. Hang on. So the sets that it would cover would be Onslaught, Legions, Scourge. Also, I believe. Oh man, there's actually a lot.
Oh, okay. Then the answer is easy. Everything in Onslaught block, please. Give me the Broken Goblins. Give me the the other fetch lands. Oh, we already have the fetch lands. Maybe just the Broken Goblins.
Yeah, Broken Goblins would be sweet. There's also Invasion block, Odyssey block, Masks block. So, man, I'd have to look over. I'm sure there's a ton of cards that could actually be pretty sweet, but...
All right, next question. New Hall Dan. Personally got into Magic when I was younger because I loved to draw and found the card artwork really appealing. Do you have any cards that appeal to you because of their artwork? Mine is Jeff Miracola's Raging Goblin art.
Ooh, Raging Goblin's a good one. I like. I think it's. I think it's called Horrible Horde. I like the really old. Yeah, Horrible Hordes. Just the really old, really abstract, what in the world is going on in the Magic card art. Those are my favorite ones. Like Stasis, Horrible Hordes, like the really, really early art.
Oh, Stasis is good. I like Yuzam.
That's a good one.
I really like that. I don't know why. I really liked that as a kid. Shivan Dragon I thought looked so cool too. Same with the original Sarah Angel. Next question. Also from Dan. Are there any cards you like that you particularly love that may not be necessarily good or super competitive? Like while you're drafting or playing Commander, a card came through for you and was super memorable afterwards.
Oh man, all my decks are built around those kind of cards.
Cobbled Wings. I still don't know why people don't like it. It is so good when it's good. You just staple it onto your 6/6 vanilla creature, and now you have a 6/6 flying, which is so good.
You beat me one time in one of our supplemental product videos with Cobbled Wings, and that was like years ago. And
are you questioning the power of Cobbled? I mean, this is clearly not the right answer because this is asking for like bad cards, but this card is clearly like top 5 draft picks. Clinton Reed 789. My girlfriend's been playing Modern Burn for a few years. I've been wanting to build her another deck with Challenger decks and Magic 25. Do you think Scred Red would be worthwhile investment into the modern meta?
Yes-ish. Scred is reasonable. It's not top tier by any stretch. I think it's lower tier than Burn. But if you're buying Scred, you're getting Blood Moons, you're getting Chandras, and other cards that are a little cheaper right now because of the reprintings and are relevant for other decks. So I think even if you play it for a while and decide, I don't actually want to Scred anymore, you're not gonna be wasting too much of the money because you're buying legit cards.
All right. Alden B4610. Seth, would you consider a follow-up series to Budget Magic decks? I've broken a modern from your Budget Spirits decks and have upgraded since and would love input on the lines of play in this current meta.
Ooh, upgraded Budget Magic videos. We play them occasionally on streams, but we have never done a full series of it. So I will add it to the list. I think it's a cool idea. The challenge is just finding time is always the big problem with adding cool things like that.
All right, Tanny Pastel. My friends got me back into Magic, but now hardly play. I want to keep playing, but only have played kitchen table format. What are some important etiquette tips if I ever make it to FNM? What was your first FNM like?
FNM is a great place to start because people... I mean, I guess it depends on the local game store, but hopefully people will be pretty understanding. I definitely remember when I first did that. People are... in general, to me, were pretty helpful with explaining things, and that's a nice part of being kind of less competitive than a GP or something like that. So I don't know if they'll go as far as letting you take things back and stuff, but people were pretty good about it when I first went to FNM. As far as like explaining mechanics, sometimes offering hints on lines of play and timing and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's pretty much the same as kitchen table. The other thing you might see is like people might not let you take back things, so make sure you do things in the right order. People may call judge on you. Don't take that as an insult. That's just getting a judge to come over and help out with the board state. But other than that, it's just like playing kitchen table Magic. Just have a good time. Don't stress out too much about it, and hopefully it'll all work out. I remember the first time I started playing FNM. I just got back into Magic, showed up with my $20 Goblin deck. Played against this person with all foreign and full art cards. So I had no idea what any card did. And it was like, oh my God, please. Had to like look up Oracle text for all the cards. I'm like, what does Celestial Purge do? I have to look it up. But hopefully you don't run into that. That's rare. And my opponent was super friendly. They would sit there and explain all their cards and let me look them up and stuff. So another
good one actually is to practice shuffling correctly, because that's something that I didn't think about when I was just playing casually and at kitchen tables. Our rules were so easygoing about stuff like that, where maybe you like mana weave a little, or just stuff that flies on the kitchen table. So that's something to look up a YouTube video about the proper way to shuffle and just like start practicing that. It's not like you're going to get in trouble if you shuffle improperly, but it's nice to start practicing that if you're going to move from the kitchen table to a slightly more competitive environment.
All right, next question. Only way. What would it take for you to read the entire MTG story from KTK until Rix?
Probably a lot. I'm not especially interested in reading MTG novels.
They need to make like a cartoon, like a Netflix series. I would watch it.
I would do that too.
Maybe a comic book. I mean, they used to make comics, but I don't know. They stopped. Like, they actually made like those shorts that they put on the WotC site. I remember reading the comic about Liliana and Garrick on Innistrad or whatever. Like, what happened to those?
Yeah, that could be cool.
I can't read anymore. My attention span is gone. DPF Junior 1, with the inclusion of Goblin War Chief in Dominaria, do you play it in Goblin 8 whack? If so, how many? And what do you cut?
No, I don't think you play it in 8 whack. But I think that it enables a deck more like the Red-Black Goblins deck that we played, where you're going a little bit bigger, maybe playing some Ether Vials, a deck more like the Legacy builds of Goblin. So I don't think you play an 8-whack in specific, but I think that it can enable a really sweet Goblins deck in Modern.
All right, USA Forever 7, will you ever do video content of Paper Magic?
You never know, but it's definitely not something that's impending or happening soon. It's not in the works yet.
It's hard since everyone is all over the place. Plus, you need a pretty good setup to make it look respectable. Even WotC struggles with this. We'll be like, what's with all the glare set? I can't see anything.
The fact that we're like so spread out is the biggest thing. Like, it would be cool to do a paper commander clash, but that requires getting people from like multiple countries and different sides of the US all in the same place. So maybe sometime is like a special event if we all make it to like a GP or something. But other than that,
Kylio Meters, if you could see a crossover set between MTG and any other franchise, what would you like to see most? I'm so salty about HasCon still.
I don't know if I would want a crossover set. That feels weird to me.
I want crossover promotions. I want like Chandra, Torch of Defiance, but instead of Chandra is like dressed up as, say, I don't know, an Overwatch character or something. You know, that'll never happen, right? But like, kind of like a fun crossover where it's just alternate art. Kind of like the anime Jason Chandra from the Japanese duel deck, stuff like that. I don't want to see like a full-blown set. I don't want to see kind of the Optimus Prime that we saw at HasCon. I just want, Prime Speaker Optimus, or Optimus Prime Speaker Zagana, I mean. Stuff like that. I want to see these fun crossovers where it's only art and Oracle text isn't changed.
I would be down with that. I think that could be cool. But yeah, I wouldn't really like it if cards were actually impacted by it.
Yeah. Next question. Nick Goulian, it looks like the CCG artifact has Richard Garfield working on it for years and they only have 4 colors. Do you think this is a statement from Garfield saying which color he'd remove from Magic first? It's black, blue, green, red. So no white.
I don't know. I didn't even know that was a thing. So
this is actually, if we had more time, maybe we'll talk about it next week. But apparently Valve, big company, hired Richard Garfield to make their next TCG artifact. Apparently it's some weird MOBA TCG thing with lanes. And Richard Garfield has been working on this for a long time, and he's envisioned it from the ground up as a digital thing. So this sounds really interesting because Richard Garfield is the original creator of Magic, and he's a pretty big deal. And the fact that he's had this like just digital ground up game, it's not like Hearthstone where it's like still a card game that just happens to be digital, but it's made with digital in mind, could be a big competitor to Magic. So it is certainly very interesting, and keep an eye on it for more news. Maybe we'll have a longer discussion.
Yeah. And actually, Garfield was designing Dominaria, I believe, as well. He was on the Dominaria design team. So he's still doing Magic stuff every now and then.
Yeah, I don't even know how you do that. Like, how do you accidentally not leak things from one company to the other?
Yeah, that is kind of weird.
All right, last question. VGSS. I like fruit. What are your favorite fruits?
I like anything with berry in it. Strawberry, blueberry. I guess bananas are okay, even though they don't have berry in the name.
I like the boring fruits. I like apples. I like bananas. Berries are okay, but only if they're good. I feel like you can't get a bad apple. Like apples are pretty consistent, but if you don't get good berries, they're just not that good. Same with bananas. Bananas are pretty consistent.
Yeah, that's true. The berries can be a little more hit or miss, but
Do you like cranberries?
cranberries are down the berry ranking, but I still like them.
I dislike cranberries. They're like one of these is not the same, but cranberries is like kind of they kind of just snuck in there somehow with the name. All right, that's all of our fish mail. Thank you everyone for sending them in. You can send them to the hashtag MDGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air.
Oh, wow. Well, I think that brings us to the end of episode 163. We're already running a little bit longer than normal, but we had a lot of Dominaria news, so I guess that
But
makes
we
sense.
just had to do like 4 weeks of spoilers in one episode, Seth.
That's the worst part about these leaks, is it really is like a month worth of content that all of a sudden is dumped on one day, which, oh my goodness. I guess maybe some people like it if you're not doing content, but from the content perspective, little bit rough. I'd rather have it spread out a little better. So anyway, Richard, thanks for hanging out. It's always fun. Any last thoughts on Dominaria or anything before we take off for the day?
No, I think just go back and read some more. There's so many cards. Like every time I do a pass on, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize this card was here. It's so hard when you can't sort by rarity and like there's no art to distinguish the cards. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I'm like kind of waiting at this point. Like I read over the spoiler and did a couple videos, but I just gotta wait. It is super hard to actually make sense of it without the art or anything. So anyway, Richard, thanks for hanging out. It's always a blast. And thank you to everyone for listening. So this is episode 163 of the MTG Goldfish podcast, wrapping up for this week. Thanks for listening. And yeah, we'll be back next week. The crew signing out.